Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wind Down Wednesday, episode 37. Just a couple of quick announcements before we start tonight while I wait for people to check on to the video. There's a new video on my Facebook page at Paula Taylor Energy, and it is an interview that I did over the weekend with Zoe from Paranormal Extraction. She talks to people about paranormal, supernatural, and metaphysical issues and issues, I guess, stuff, things. So we had a really wonderful conversation this weekend about sound healing and the power of sound. I really encourage you to check it out. And what came out of me for that was kind of this idea that it doesn't really matter what kind of sound you're using, whether you connect to the primordial chakra tones or to chant, or to singing, or sometimes to screaming. We talked about that a little bit, and I've talked about that here on Wind Down Wednesday. What's important is that you make sound, that you use your voice in an intentional way with the intention of whether it's healing or growth or expansion or just to be in your body. It's such a powerful tool. So I encourage you to check out that interview. It's posted on my Facebook page. So I'm going to start tonight talking about acceptance and softening toward our flaws. I'm going to use air quotes every time I use the word flaws. So if that annoys you, I'm sorry, but it's happening. I'm going to start tonight with my own story. Sometimes I talk a little bit about a topic and then I go into my example. And I think the best way to illustrate what this awareness I came to, the awareness that I had about this topic is to go into my personal story straight away. And then we'll talk a little bit about what I got from it and where we're going with the meditation. So I've been talking for a couple of months, I think now, about shadow work, about working with that really difficult stuff, the parts of ourselves that we don't really like to think about or see or look at, dealing with things like mental imbalance and long-standing core beliefs that we've held since childhood. This is all really heavy stuff. And I've mentioned multiple times on this show, and it's in my book as well, that I've struggled with disordered eating patterns, with eating issues, probably since I was about 10 or 11 years old. I've been kind of thinking back, when did this actually really start? Because it feels like it's been around forever. And I mentioned a couple weeks ago, it tends to get triggered when I'm upset about something else. It's kind of my go-to coping mechanism. And I had been triggered about some infertility and miscarriage wounds that I'm still kind of working to heal. And so the food stuff came up, but it was so powerful, and it hasn't been that way for a really long time. It's been kind of like a low level thing that's in the background that I sort of was like, well, this is never, I'll get to this eventually, or it's not so bad right now, but it never really went away. But it's a lot better than it has been at certain points in my life. But it was really coming up, and I was struggling so much. We talked about struggle a couple weeks ago, and I had this moment. It was a lot like Homer with the barbecue. If you didn't watch that episode from 2 weeks ago, go back and watch it. I talked about an episode of The Simpsons where Homer's trying to build a barbecue, and it's just not going right for him, and he finally gives up, but he gives up in frustration and anger, and that's very much what this was like. I just like Homer running at the barbecue with the umbrella and getting like thrown onto the ground and laying there, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep fighting this. I give up. I just give up. And the initial thoughts that came to me after that were from that triggered state that I had been in. They weren't necessarily healthy thoughts, but I started thinking like, if I'm going to have an eating disorder, I might as well at least have the one where I'm thin. That is probably the first thought that I had. And so for about a day or so, I was just like, I give up. I'm counting calories. It's what I know to do. It's how I know to punish myself. That's what this has really been about, as I kind of got into this awareness. But a really strange thing happened. I started to feel really good. And not in a denial way, not in a like, ooh, I'm back in this and it's great and I'm being pulled in. Like, I know that the energetic difference. I started feeling expanded. I started feeling lighter. I started feeling so much relief. I started feeling this space that opened up in my energetic field when I gave up that struggle, truly gave up that struggle. And it wasn't done as an offer of surrender. It was a surrender, but it was like a super angry, I can't do it anymore. This is killing me. I quit. That's the kind of surrender this was. But I found that I wasn't feeling punitive toward myself. I wasn't feeling like I was punishing myself by trying to eat less and less and less calories, which is kind of how counting calories has gone for me in the past. I was feeling more like, how can I nourish my body with the remaining calories I have for the day? And this, if you don't have issues with food, this may sound like way out there to you. You might be like, well, of course I nourish my body with calories. That's what calories are for. But if you have any kind of a disordered relationship with food, the idea of nourishing your body is very foreign because the idea of punishing my body is where I have lived for so long in my head. And so as this was shifting, I also saw and heard a few people say some things to me that essentially kind of added up to this idea that if we are constantly trying to change ourselves, or if the things we see in other people that we don't like are reflections of things in ourselves that we'd like to change, which is a very common idea. I think I've talked about that idea before. What if we're not supposed to change that stuff? What if we're just supposed to accept it and love it? And I've heard this before. My friend Paul Bucky at BioTouch all the time says to me, you just need to let yourself be loved. And that's essentially what that is. That bringing that love, bringing that acceptance, letting go of this need that this idea that there's something wrong with you. But I felt this shift this time in my body. Instead of understanding it here, it came fully down into my body, into my energetic field, and into my heart. And I started thinking about all my flaws, all the things that are too much about me. I'm too controlling. I'm too fat or too thin, which I've had the same person tell me both at various times in my life. I'm too loud. I'm too much. I'm too serious. And we all hear that stuff. What you hear may be different from what I hear, but these are messages that we've internalized, that someone said to us. Maybe I remember very vividly the first time in high school when a male teacher told me, you look too serious. You need to smile more, because I was concentrating. You look angry. Like, no, I'm just serious. I'm just concentrating. But we internalize all that stuff, and we start to see that stuff as flaws. We start to see that as a problem with ourselves. And the idea of being too controlling is something that I've been struggling with for years. I'm a very OCD type person. I'm a very, I like things to be a certain way, and I don't like surprises. I mean, I like good surprises, but I like to know what's going to happen. And of course, we don't really know what's going to happen in the broader sense of things. We don't really have control. But I started thinking, what if I stopped trying to fight these flaws and I just accepted them? If I stopped trying to change them and I just loved them, I just loved these flaws about myself. I stopped trying to say, oh, I'm not controlling. I've let that go. I go with the flow. And I just said, yep, I'm super controlling. It's just how I'm made. And the irony of that is that love is the only thing that inspires true change, energetic, shifts from the very bottom of our being. That's inspired by love. So all these years that I spent trying to shame myself or trying to change myself out of guilt or fear, we can change our behaviors that way. Dr. Phil calls that white knuckling. It's about the only thing I've ever taken away from Dr. Phil. But, when people go on a diet and they're white knuckling it. So you can change out of fear. You can change out of shame, out of guilt. But it's a surface change. It's a presentation to the world. I've changed. But underneath that is still that fear and that guilt and that shame and that feeling that I have flaws. I'm trying to hide my flaws. I'm trying to change my flaws. But love and acceptance, the idea that we are perfectly imperfect, that there is nothing to change, this is what prompts us to finally let go, to finally expand, to grow, and to change. And again, it's true irony in that fight that you think is going to get you to change. All these years I'm fighting. I gave that fight up. I just was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm just going to embrace this. I'm just going to go down this rabbit hole. And I'm thinking, this is going to get really bad and I'm going to have to go into treatment. And, there are all these things in my head. But I think the level of release that I finally achieved by really letting go, like viscerally letting go of that fight, not just telling myself I was letting go of that fight, but in my body and my entire being, just being like, I'm not fighting this anymore. I give in. That was that surrender that came out of so much pain and not being able to carry that pain anymore, that shifted me into a state of love and acceptance and a new view of myself. And I talk about this a lot. We're so much nicer to other people than we are to ourselves. We tell things to ourselves that we would never say to someone else because we know they're terrible. And so this is an opportunity to see yourself as someone you love very much, to embrace the flaws of someone you love very much and to say, it's okay. It's okay if you're controlling. It's okay if you're too loud. It's okay if you're too much of whatever that is. And again, the irony of that is that giving into that opens the space for acceptance to come in. Every week, we invite in divine energy and divine flow and divine love. That can't come into us if there's no space for it. I've been doing a lot of this decluttering work, and it's kind of the same idea. You've got to clear layers away. If you want new clothes, but your closet is so full of clothes that you can't add clothes, you clear layers away of clothes, and then there's space for new clothes to come into your life. Stuffing more clothes into a tiny little space energetically is what a lot of us are doing. And I'm using a physical example, but that's what's happening internally to us. We just keep stuffing fear and guilt and shame into ourselves. Oh, good. And maybe originally it was internalized. It was something that someone said, we're born into the state that we are in. We're imperfectly perfect. We're perfectly imperfect, however you want to say that. But we live in a society and there's rules and of course there's growth. And that's the interesting thing about this, is that by acknowledging that there's nothing to change, then you open that space for change, for growth and expansion. And again, I think I knew that on a mental level. I could have told you that, but to feel the shift of it internally in my actual body, to embody that, has been a complete shift for me. It has softened my judgments of myself. And I feel like I can work with myself as a team member now, as opposed to an adversary. You know, I was butting heads with myself for so long. You know, oh, you're too controlling. You can't be that controlling. You got to be, you know, blah, blah, blah. Don't count your food. And blah, blah, blah. Like, what if I like counting my food? What if it serves my needs? You know, having that space and that non-judgment completely changed how I felt even about food in this last week. And I've noticed now I eat when I'm hungry. And that's always been my goal. And when I'm not hungry, then I kind of look at my little, okay, how many calories do I have left? Is it worth it? Am I bored? It's given me the space to stop and think and be intuitive and bring intuition into an area of my life that was completely blocked from that. And the other thing I've noticed is that we don't have control of what's outside of us. But I was trying so hard to control that I lost sight of the part of me that I can control, which is my actual self, my behaviors and my energetic field and my immediate space. I let that get out of control because I was busy trying to control things I couldn't control. And I think whether you have eating issues or not, that's a universal thing. That feeling for some need of control and recognizing that that's okay and softening towards that. And then finding, as I have, oh, I'm so much more in flow now because I opened that space. I invited that energy that's so much more than I'll ever be physically in this plane to support me while I am physically in this plane, to carry me along, to fill that part of myself that was so occupied with fight and struggle and fear and shame and guilt and all of that all of that stuff that we carry around. Letting go of that opens that space for unconditional love, and that opens space for expansion, and that opens space for the very change we've been fighting for. So I'm just checking in briefly because I was trying to decide earlier if I wanted to describe this meditation at all or just go into it. And what I'll say very briefly is that we're going to work with the part of yourself that you've been fighting tonight. And chances are you know exactly what it is. You might not have an exact word for it, but you've got a feeling it's in there. And you're, oh yeah, it might be like, oh, that stuff. And we're going to trace that back to the first time you remember it occupying your space. So for me, I have memories even in junior high of going on diets, of trying to limit what I ate, of, you know, maybe feeling like I was gaining too much weight too soon. I remember I broke 100 pounds in 7th grade and I was like appalled. I was also 5'4", which is the height I am now, or maybe I was 5'3" at the time, but I haven't really grown since I was 12. So, you know, weighing 102 pounds at that point, I was a skinny kid, but I was already having these feelings like, oh, I'm so fat. And I broke this arbitrary number and it's terrible. So I want you in this meditation to go back to that time, wherever you trace it to be. It's very likely that it might be childhood, but it might be early adulthood. It might be recent, whatever comes up for you. And then we're going to see that person as a person separate from ourselves. This is kind of like, if you've ever done inner child work, this is kind of what we're doing tonight. So we're going to go back to that person and we're going to offer love and acceptance and space for releasing that fight and that struggle. And perhaps we're going to offer what that person needed in that moment, but for whatever reason didn't get. And that's all I'm going to say about the meditation. So let's begin. Let's begin with 3 deep oxytocin breaths. You can add that grounding oomph on the 3rd one if you'd like. As you breathe, bring your awareness, your mind into this moment. Let go of what happened earlier today before this point. Let go of what happens when we're finished or what happens tomorrow or the rest of the week. Let yourself just breathe here for a few moments, continuing to use those oxytocin breaths, sighing that breath out. And as you're ready, continue to breathe deeply, but you can release that sighing if you'd like. And very intentionally tonight, let's open that crown chakra, the top of the head. Let's set the intention of clearing space in our energetic field to invite in that divine energy, that unconditional love, that flow of grace. Let's invite that in through the top of the head and the face, growing spacious, allowing space for this energy to come into your neck and throat, your shoulders and upper arms. Let this acceptance and love flow into your forearms, into your wrists and hands. Let this beautiful light flow into your chest and your upper back, into your belly, into your mid-back, low belly and low back, into your pelvis. Bring this light, this spacious, unconditional acceptance through the hips and pelvis, down into the thighs, into your knees. Really let your knees get spacious here. Let go of anything you've been carrying, any burdens you've been holding in your knees and your shoulders. Continue allowing that energy to flow down your shins and calves into your ankles and feet. Let yourself grow roots down into the ground, knowing and setting the intention that you lovingly release anything that's ready to be released tonight into the earth for recycling, for the highest good. That energy can be used somewhere else even after you release it. Even if it feels like energy that no longer serves you, it can serve somewhere or someone else. Bring your energetic sanctuary into your space. If you're unfamiliar with that concept, just imagine that you're sitting now in the most beautiful, safe space you can imagine. It's right here in the room with you. There's no need to leave your body. Stay spacious in your body. We want to release from the body here, not from the mind, not from the spiritual realms, but from the physical and energetic space of that physical body. Let yourself come to a space on your planet, in your sanctuary, that feels most healing for you. Perhaps it's that waterfall of joy, or your healing cave, or a new place you've not yet explored. Perhaps it's just that safe space we use so often in this sanctuary. But let yourself really feel that you're there. Let yourself notice not just what it looks like, what does it feel like to be in this space? Feel that spaciousness come into your body. Feel yourself relax here. Feel how safe you are. And know that you are safe through this entire exercise. And as you're ready, let your awareness come to this struggle, this fight, this issue, this topic, whatever word works for you. Let yourself, as usual, intuitively come to this. Perhaps you'll surprise yourself. Perhaps your intuitive information is not what you have thought of. And this may not be your longest standing issue. It may not be a core belief issue. It may just be something that you feel like you keep butting your head up against within yourself. And if you're at a loss, think about you're too much. You're too much this, you're too much that. Or maybe it's you're not enough this, or you're not enough that. Whatever comes to you then, bring it into your space. Bring it into this physical space that we're in, this safe, energetic sanctuary. And let your mind float back to where this all started. And you may find that something comes to your mind, but then you're drawn back a little further. So give yourself a little bit of time here to find what feels like the origin of this quote unquote flaw, of this belief, this false belief that you've been fighting. And as you find your place, what's important here is that this feels like the origin to you. It doesn't have to be the objective origin of when this started. What feels like the origin to you is what you're holding in the body as the origin, as the beginning of this belief about yourself. This feeling that you needed to change this part of yourself. And see yourself now in this origin space at the age that you were. Really get a picture of yourself and stay with the observer, meditative mind here. Imagine this other version of you as a separate being from who you are right now. If you have to change the picture of what you see, you can. It's most powerful if you can see, let's say, the child version of yourself. But if that's too difficult, then see yourself as something you can love. See yourself as a kitten or a puppy or a zoo animal, a little cuddly panda. That's completely fine if that's what works for you. If you can stick with where we're going and see yourself as your little person or your younger self, even if it was just last week, it was your younger self, do that. But if you need to adjust to stay with the exercise, then go ahead and adjust. So first, sit down across from yourself or your zoo animal, your panda, and hold out your hands. And let this other version of yourself take your hands. Just let yourself connect with this other person, this younger version of you. There's no need to say anything yet. Let this littler version of you or younger version of you know that this is safe. Let them feel into this energetic sanctuary because they may have never felt safe up until this point in their life when you are intervening to bring safety and acceptance and love. And if this is enough for you, if this is too much for you, then you can stop here. If you need to breathe, if you need to pause, try to keep your hands in the hands of your other, though. You don't have to go further in the meditation, but try to just stay present with your previous self here. If you're ready to move on, if you'd like to go forward, maybe you cup your hands around this other you's face. Maybe you bring this other you into an embrace. And whatever you're called to do, tell this other self what he or she or they needs to hear. What did this version of yourself need to hear at this time in their life? What could you say to this version of yourself to make them understand that whatever they're too much of or not enough of is not a flaw? In fact, maybe it's a gift. How can you convince this younger version of yourself to fully embrace this issue, this belief, this quote unquote flaw? Perhaps all your self needs is just for you to hold their hands and gaze into their eyes. That's a hugely powerful practice. Perhaps this version of yourself is looking for a gift. Perhaps you can give them something that they would treasure, an ice cream cone, a stuffed animal, a flower. Speak to this version of yourself in whatever love language calls to you. Perhaps this younger version of yourself just needs a hug. Perhaps they're craving physical touch. And if you can offer that, then give that. But whatever you do, tell this version of yourself out loud if possible, there is no need to change who you are. I love and accept you exactly as you are. There is no need to fight who you are. I love and accept you exactly the way you are. And as you say those words, feel them in your current body. Feel yourself soften as you say these words, as you think these thoughts. And let that softness travel through your hands into the hands of your other self. Bring that softness into this version of yourself who may have never experienced softness at this point in time or felt that they hadn't. And stay here for a few moments, giving this other self whatever they need, whatever will help you both soften and release that fight, that struggle to change out of fear or shame. Open that space for love. Open that space for unconditional love and acceptance. Invite that golden light of the divine to come into that space now, to come into your space, your physical body, the physical space of your other self, the emotional space of both of you, the energetic space around and within the body of both of you. Bring that unconditional, accepting love of the divine into those spaces and let yourself soften. Nam. Sat. Nam. Sat. Nam. Let the truth of your identity be that you are soft with love and acceptance for yourself, all aspects of yourself, every single part of yourself. The shadow and the light, the fear and the shame. Love and accept that too, soften toward that too. And as you're ready, reassure this other version of yourself that you are available with support. Leave them a gift if you like. Give them a hug and a kiss. Look deeply into their eyes and say, I love you. Invite them to stay in your sanctuary if you like, until they are ready to go back to their own time and space. Gently separate yourself from your other self. Very gently, very slowly, with so much reverence for the experience that you've just had. Let yourself release your energetic sanctuary, if you'd like, back to where it's stored in your energy fields. If you'd like to, you can gently allow that crown chakra to close or leave it open for the highest good, love and acceptance of all things. And one more time, let's seal this practice. Let's fill this newfound spaciousness in ourselves with that unconditional love and acceptance that comes from that divine source that is all we are. Bring it into the head and the neck. Bring it into the shoulders and the arms and the hands. Bring it into the chest and the back and the belly. Into the pelvis and the hips. Fill this newfound space with love and acceptance. Let it come into your thighs and your knees, your lower legs and your feet. Send this love, this acceptance all the way down into the earth where you're connected to the ground. Nourish the earth that nourishes you with this love and acceptance. And affirm with me out loud, I am fully present in my body. I am fully present in my body and I love and accept all the parts of myself. I am fully present in my body, and I am love. Go ahead and wiggle your fingers, roll your wrists if you'd like, wiggle your feet, your toes, move your head around. Just let yourself discharge a little bit of energy. Let yourself come back to yourself. And as you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you so much for joining me this week and every week. Thank you so much for your willingness to commit to this practice for yourself. Let this practice ripple out beyond your own personal spaciousness and into the spaciousness that is available for all of us when we're ready to step into love and acceptance. Have a beautiful rest of your evening, a beautiful rest of your week, and I will see you next week for Wind Down Wednesday.